As government officials debate the best way to cut the budget, the country's massive defense spending has come under scrutiny. But it turns out, even when the Pentagon wants to cut back, they don't have Congress's support. Take this example. The Pentagon wants to save $3 billion by foregoing the refurbishing of the tanks you see there. With the wars winding down, the Army is finding they don't need any more of them. Many lawmakers say if we stop making the tanks, it would hurt the economy and put thousands of jobs on the line. But it also turns out that the companies that manufacture these tanks are major contributors to congressional campaigns. So is this the kind of defense spending or is this about national security or getting reelected? To discuss this and more, I'm joined now by Ben Freeman, national security investigator for the Project on Government Oversight, and also Paul McCleary, a land warfare reporter for Defense News. Welcome, gentlemen, to the both of you.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm going to start with Ben. Washington, they're talking about cutting the deficit. The Pentagon they're pointing out an easy way to do so, but Congress wants them to keep on spending this money. What do you think is going on?
This is a clear example of when politics interferes with good policy and with good national security. You've got a Pentagon who's saying to you, hey, we don't need these tanks. We need to find a lot of ways to save a lot of money. There's some serious cuts to Pentagon spending right around the corner, and the Pentagon has basically said we can afford to cut these weapons here. We can save a lot of money by doing it, but then you have these politicians, many of whom are getting campaign contributions from the very firms that are making these tanks, saying, hey, we want you to go ahead and buy these tanks anyways, even though you don't need them. This is just bad government spending. This is bad for national security.
What do you think, Paul? Is this another example of wasteful spending?
The Army, in order to close down the plant in Lima, Ohio, where the tanks are made, in 2014, wants to reopen it in 2017 at a cost about $600 million. So they'd save $2.4 billion, roughly. So the tanks, the Army wants the tanks in the end. It just depends when they want them and what kind of variants they want.
But it looks like they have more than enough tanks as it is to meet the defense needs. So why bring any more in there?
I think a lot of it is modernizing the tanks they have. They will be building some new tanks if Congress gets their way. Most of it is a modernization program, bringing them up to the next level of networking and communications.
Okay. Presumably, we have the winding down of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and therefore the Army doesn't need as much of this equipment, these tanks, more specifically. But, I mean, what do you think? Do you think that they are still relevant in modern warfare in the climate today?
They are. The United States, the Marines have some tanks in Afghanistan currently. I know that the Canadians and the Danes had great success using tanks in the counterinsurgency campaign in Afghanistan. But in a counterinsurgency, you don't need the number of tanks that you need facing off against a peer threat. So tanks do have a place in the future, not as large as maybe we thought they did 10, 15 years ago, but they'll be a force to be reckoned with in future conflicts.
All right, perhaps they have a place, but not as big of a place. You know who is kind of on the forefront of this, speaking out against wasteful spending, is Senator Rand Paul. Let's take a listen to him speaking about this very topic.
Well, the overriding problem to me in Washington and for our country is the debt. The only way we're ever going to figure out our debt problem is we're going to have to compromise. Conservatives like myself, who believe national defense is very important, will have to say that not every dollar spent on the military is sacred.
What do you think, Ben? Do you think that military spending is considered sacred and off limits?
I think in a lot of cases it is, and I think we need to change that mentality. We've heard from admirals, leading figures in the military itself, that the national debt is the greatest threat to national security. And we need to start taking that more seriously when we consider the weapons we're procuring. For example, the Asia pivot, well, if we're going to pivot to Asia and we're going to devote a lot of resources to there, if we're simultaneously increasing our debt to China by doing that, it's sort of hypocritical to do. In the long run, we need to think about national security. We need to think about jobs, and economic security is a big part of that. Our military is the greatest in the world, and there's no danger in that if we cut a little here and there where we can.
And you had mentioned, Ben, earlier lobbying and the lobbying dollars that goes from the defense industry. To what extent do you think that lawmakers are swayed by the lobbying power of the defense industry?
Oh, I think it matters immensely, especially in a campaign season. There's thousands of lobbyists working for the defense industry every single day, and those lobbyists are also making campaign contributions. Those companies are donating tens of millions of dollars into these campaigns. And so in an election year, when every single dollar matters, when you need a lot of money for those campaign commercials, literally your job is on the line for some of these representatives. So with these deep-pocketed Pentagon contractors can come in and provide that money, it matters immensely.
All right, but lawmakers are saying if we cut this kind of spending, it will lead to significant job loss, which will in turn hurt the economy. Paul, what do you think about that? Is that a good reason to justify the spending?
It's a part of it. I mean, the plant where the Abrams tanks are made is in Lima, Ohio, and there are jobs at stake in Lima, Ohio. What the members of Congress from Ohio and General Dynamics will say is that these are highly skilled jobs. They're hard to replace. If you shut the line down for 3 years, it'll be hard to reconstitute the line and to hire back those skilled workers because they'll have gone to other jobs.
Right, but with the economy, isn't it kind of supply and demand? And if the Pentagon is saying that they don't need this, this is an oversupply, why should we keep feeding a demand that isn't there?
It comes down to jobs, and all politics is local. And
shouldn't there be a reorganization of jobs then, instead of pumping out things that we don't need?
I think that's probably above above what the Army is capable of doing.
Well, the Army is now saying that they don't need them. They're at the forefront of this, saying, "Hey, we don't need these tanks."
Right, and then the congressmen who have to answer to the voters of Ohio are saying, "Yes, we do need them because we need the jobs." So,
well, I guess I'm going to ask you to respond to that. What do you think, Ben?
I think the question here is, if we're going to assume that we want our government to create jobs for us, we need to ask what the most efficient way to do that is. And research has found that military spending is one of the least effective ways that the government can create jobs. There's plenty of more beneficial programs out there. Education, for example, healthcare. These are all shown to be better producers of jobs with government spending than the military. So if this really is a question of jobs, the military simply isn't the best way to do it.
All right, and this is just one example. We're talking $3 billion, and if this sequestration does take into effect and Congress cannot agree on the budget, we're talking $500 billion. That's what the defense industry stands to lose. So this is kind of just scratching the surface.
Right. It's important to put that $500 billion in context. Number one, that's over 10 years. Number two, when you consider the scale of the defense budget, that's really not a gigantic cut. That basically would take defense spending to what it was in 2006, 2007. We're fighting 2 wars then. And the military has grown exponentially since 9/11. So this is a cut out of a department that has grown immeasurably. So this is not going to decimate us. It's not going to be catastrophic. We'll still be by far the strongest military in the world.
All right. Well, we have a big debate tonight, the vice presidential debate. Paul, do you expect this defense spending to be on the table?
Highly unlikely. I'm sure I'm sure Joe Biden will make reference to it just because he's an old foreign policy hand. He's an old defense hand. He pushed through the MRAP program that Army and Marines didn't necessarily want. So I'm sure he'll bring it up, but I don't imagine it'll be too large a piece of the debate.
What do you think, Ben? Before, it was Ron Paul's kind of rallying point. We heard him this was what he tried to press over and over and over again, the fact that we should take a look at defense spending. Now, we're down to the Republican and Democratic vice presidential candidate. Do you think it will be part of the discussion?
I think it will be, but I think Paul's probably right. It probably won't take center stage. Jobs are going to be the key issue tonight, possibly healthcare and taxes, some of those other issues. But hopefully we do hear more about it because it's a critical issue.
Absolutely. And I guess we're going to have to tune in tonight to find out. Gentlemen, appreciate both of you coming into the studio. That was Ben Freeman, the national security investigator for the Project on Government Oversight, and also Paul McCleary, land warfare reporter for Defense News.